Imu has landed on the Island of Giants, and just like we all predicted, they have taken this already chaotic struggle between the Giants and the Holy Knights and multiplied it by 1,000, using powers that even in a world filled with hockey and devil fruits can only be described as magic to turn allies into enemies. And with our 3 heavy hitters still MIA, it looks like it will be up to the current leader of Elbaf, Elder Jarl, to step up and confront this overwhelming threat. But before we get to any of that, let's talk about the cover story. Because Yamato has finally done it. She has reached her goal of returning Yasui's sword to Emma's shrine, which means that her journey might actually be over. In fact, it says so right there in the text, bringing this pilgrimage to an end. The only question is, can we take this literally, or will there be more to the story to come? Because if I'm being honest, if this really is the end, I don't think it was worth being as long as it was. I mean, if all we're going to get out of this is adding Ulti in page 1 as Yamato's first vassals, and her improving her rep in Wano by stopping Who's Who, then we could have cut this entire story in half and gotten the exact same results. So despite how long it's already been, I actually am kind of hoping that we do get more to this. Let's see Yamato be named Daimyo of a territory by Momo, let's see her get the rest of her vassals, hell, let's have her be the one to stop a rampaging Jack from destroying part of Wano, to mirror Odin doing the same thing with the giant boar. Really, I need something more to make this cover story feel like it was worth the time investment. But if this is the end, then hopefully all of it was built up for what we'll see from the Oni princess once she shows back up in the actual story. Speaking of re-entering the story, Imu must have felt left out since we haven't really seen or heard from them since they turned Saturn into a Halloween decoration back in chapter 1125. And given that they are potentially the final main antagonist of the story, depending on what Oda decides to do with Blackbeard, they probably felt like it was about time for them to step up, flex just a bit, and show off why they're still a threat to our MC even with his new godlike powers. Also, by the way, in this video, and basically every video that I do that mentions Imu, I'm going to refer to them in a non-gender specific way, just because as of right now, we have no real concrete evidence saying one way or the other which gender Imu is. Though I will mention that I am starting to lean a bit more in the direction of Imu being female due to the fact that out of everyone here, they chose to take control of Gunko's body, despite the fact that Killincam is definitely the more powerful out of the 3. And once they did, her hair got very noticeably longer. It's still not concrete evidence, but it is starting to sway me just a bit. It also brings in a lot more questions as to why they were so obsessed with Lily and now Vivi, but that's a topic for a completely different video. Anyway, now that they're here, they immediately make sure everyone knows it by knocking out the giant kids and some of the adults that had come to try and rescue them with what seems to be Conqueror's Haki. I'm saying seems to be because after everything they do in this chapter and what we've seen them do before this, I'm not feeling confident enough to call any of their powers simply just Haki. I'm not saying that magic definitely exists in the One Piece world just yet, but I am saying that after what we see in this chapter and everything we've seen Imu do before this, we have to be a bit more open to the idea. Now, right before this, when the Giants tried to free the kids from their forced march, they ended up falling victim to the thorns. And what's interesting about that though, is that Olivia makes notice of it, and Oda makes sure that we notice her making notice of it. Now, it's understandable that she is surprised by what just happened, given that every other time the Giants have tried to help the kids and got hurt by the thorns, the kids were asleep, so this would be their first time actually seeing it happen. But the fact that Oda devoted a whole panel to only Olivia reacting to it tells me that he has some kind of plan for her for later in this arc that will play a role in bypassing this power. Though aside from forcing Summers to turn it off, there's not really much they can do to get rid of it, because even killing him might not actually work. Because as we learned from Boa back when she was fighting Blackbeard, some Devil Fruit powers can remain active well after their user dies. So even if they were able to kill Summers, there's no guarantee that the thorns would disappear. The only other thing I can think of is that maybe once the Monster Trio re-enters the story, that the kids will run into Zoro, and since Olivia now knows about the thorns, she can direct him into cutting them. Which we know they can definitely be cut even if they're infused with Haki. But that also means that Zoro will have to be the one to face off against their new babysitter, as Imu orders Summers to take over guiding the kids. Who, by the way, is also now regenerating from the severe yet quick ass-kicking Scopper gave him in the previous chapter. As of right now, I'm not sure if it's just that Scopper's attack didn't do enough damage to the Holy Knight to completely cut off his healing, which makes sense considering he was in a hurry to go rescue his kid, or if his healing kicking back in so fast is due to Imu's influence. Could very well be that since the Holy Knights get their regenerative powers from Imu, that their presence on the island, even when using Gunko as a proxy, is enhancing that power. But now that he's back up, that means he has at least one more fight in store for this arc. And as of this moment, my bet's on it being Zoro. Though we can't count Robin out just yet, she might also want to have a word or two with the Holy Knight after what he did to Saul. And she might just get the chance to, as she does make yet another attempt at escaping the thorns in this chapter the moment Saturn is out of eyeshot. Doesn't really go any better for her this time than it did the last time she tried, but we do get this moment following right after she makes this attempt, where we focus in on a panel of the library. And look, while I have no evidence of this other than it feels like something Oda would do, I would not be surprised if in the next few chapters, like a phoenix rising from the flames, Biblo the owl in charge of the library comes flying in to help. I mean, the owl's obviously not going to just sit back and die in the fire. We're going to see him again eventually, so why not have him show up now to help Robin escape, and then she can work with him and the rest of the crew to try and put out the fires. The only other appearance I can think of for the owl to make would be at the very end of the arc, where it would be revealed that he used his power to shrink the books and carry as many as he could out of the flames. But I don't know, I kind of feel like that would just be repeating Ohara. Which, if it was just an arc surrounding the Giants, I wouldn't be too upset by, but given the importance Robin's had so far, and how this arc kind of started by giving her some closure to one of the most tragic events of her life, kind of repeating something from that doesn't feel right. It would be a much stronger plotline if her part in this is preventing the government, or in this case IMU directly, from completely erasing the culture and history of another island. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just where I think her story for this arc should go, because I don't think she's going to be getting a real 1v1 fight during this arc. That little tussle she had with Summers will probably be the closest to a real fight she'll get, besides maybe running into one of the nightmares. So I really feel like somehow saving the library should be her big moment. But let me know what you think in the comments. Speaking of big moments, another one we get in this chapter is the very short conversation between Emu and Killingham, where they chastise him for his nightmares not really getting the job done. And this is where he reveals that he's able to keep the method he uses to summon them open, allowing him to essentially respawn the nightmares over and over for as long as he wants. And he doesn't seem to have the same setback that Kato did with his flame clouds that he used to keep Onigashima in the air, where they did put a bit of a strain on him when he kept them active. Yeah, no, as far as we can tell, summoning the nightmares doesn't really seem to drain any of Killingham's energy, so our new Dragon Boy possibly could literally keep this going forever, as long as he has people here to summon the nightmares from. Which means taking him down realistically should be at the very least a top 2 priority. I'll give dealing with Emu the number 1 status because once they're gone, the difficulty level for this arc drops down from being insane to just hard. But as long as Killingham is active, then they have an endless army at their disposal. And while the nightmares haven't really been that much of a hassle to deal with, eventually the sheer number of them will tire everyone out, so taking down their source is something they have to prioritize. And since we already assigned Zoro to be the one to take on Summers, because his swords might be the only key to saving the kids from the thorns, I guess then we'll have to give Sanji the honor of taking down Killingham, who, in my opinion, is probably the strongest of the 3 Holy Knights, definitely the most dangerous if we're looking at just their Devil Fruit abilities. So this might be the first time we see Sanji take on the second strongest opponent in an arc, while Zoro takes the third. Well, actually, I guess this will be the second time, because Hachi was definitely not stronger than Karubi. Again, it really depends on who you consider to be the strongest of the two, Killingham or Summers. Personally, I'm voting Killingham every day of the week. But without question, the most powerful threat to the Island of Giants currently is Imu Nerona. And now that we've finally covered every other talking point from this chapter, we can finally get to the part that has captured everyone's attention. For good reason too, because what the fuck was any of that? Starting off with their brand new look in this chapter, they've taken Gunko's design and made it much more devilish, with the demon wings and long arrow-shaped tail. They even have one of those long pitchforks that classic depictions of the devil are usually sporting. It's very much a cartoonish and standard look for someone who is supposed to have some kind of demonic power. The only thing they're really missing at this point to complete the King of Hell aesthetic are horns and the red skin. But the fact that it is so in line with what your first thought of a humanoid devil would be, it kinda loses that threatening feeling someone as powerful as Emu should have. This is basically our first real time seeing Emu in action, the potential final villain of the entire series. Just their design alone should leak intimidation and make even us as the readers feel nervous every time we see them on page. But the first time I saw them in this chapter, my first thought was literally, this looks almost exactly how I imagined Stussy would look if she awakened her devil fruit. And look, normally I'm perfectly fine with Oda's more cartoonish designs for his characters, but if I'm being completely honest, I kinda wish he had taken some notes from Bleach or Black Clover when it comes to designing his devil-like characters. All that being said though, we do have to take into account that while this is Emu, it's not actually Emu. This is IMU using a portion of their power through Gunko, so this design is more along the lines of what they did to the Giants, just with them taking direct control. So it's not likely that this is even close to their final look. And once we get to see them in action in their actual body, I imagine that their true design will be much, much more intimidating. That's just talking about the design though. Everything else about IMU in this chapter shows us exactly why they are considered the final boss of the series. I mean, just the fact that the very first thing we see them do as the chapter opens is flex what we assume is their Conqueror's Haki makes them someone that we have to take seriously. Because that's where we got into in the story post the time skip. Almost everyone these days can use basic armament and observation haki, so that alone isn't really enough to warrant concern. Showing the ability to use the advanced forms of either of those two puts you on the radar. We're now keeping a bit of a close eye on you. Still not too concerned as long as the big three are around though. But you having even just baseline Conqueror's Haki has to put us on high alert. And that's exactly how the Giants should have approached IMU in this chapter. Because they know exactly what Conqueror's Haki feels like. They felt it firsthand from Shanks and in that giant blast back on Egghead. So once they saw the Giants that have already reached the kids themselves, and even a few of the Giants in their crew start foaming at the mouth and pass out, they should have taken extreme caution when approaching this tiny human in front of them. But instead, Bragi made the single biggest mistake of his life and decided to grab IMU. Which we already know that IMU does not like to be seen, as King Cobra and Sabo learned the hard way, so even when using Gunko as a proxy, we can imagine that the hatred extends to being touched too. And look, the second he grabbed him, I knew things were not going to end well for the Giant. What I did not expect, however, is for IMU to pull out a grimoire from Black Clover and do their best Asta impression by summoning a dagger and a freaking shotgun from it. Neither are as cool as any of Asta's swords in my opinion, but Black Clover is my favorite shonen manga, and Asta is my favorite character from it, so I might be a bit biased. Anyway, they then proceed to free themselves by stabbing the dagger right into Bragi's hand, and to punish the Giant for daring to lay a hand on them, IMU takes her shotgun and uses it to shoot off his hand. A punishment that far outweighs the crime they committed in normal society, but IMU sees themselves as king of all things, and to defy them in any way is deserving of the most severe punishment. And look, in almost any other circumstance, if Bragi was any of the other thousands of Giants that live on Elbaf, he probably would have been executed on the spot. The only thing that saved him is that IMU realized that after the late King Kiro's death, an heir to his throne was never established, as both of his sons were technically not qualified to become king. Haruden, due to being seen as an illegitimate son since his mother was not a giant native to Elbaf, and Loki for having been accused of the crime of killing his father in a mad attempt for power. So, with the throne empty, IMU decided to place someone they control in it by using their powers to trap Bragi in a magic circle, flipping him upside down, and inverting the good-hearted giant into a demonic creature full of evil, towering over all of the other giants. And they then order him to kill Elder Jarl and take over the island as its new king. Well, kings because he do the exact same thing to Dory too, and plan on having both of them rule over the island. Which does make sense, seeing as the co-captains of the giant warrior pirates are both equally respected amongst the giants as elder statesmen of their people, following only slightly behind Elder Jarl. So once he's gone, there won't really be anyone who can dispute their claim to the throne. Though I think given the circumstances, this might be a case where the giants are a bit more willing to forgo their traditions and allow Haruden to become their king, despite being a half-breed, because it beats out the alternative. Hell, I think they'd even be willing to roll the dice with Loki if Elder Jarl were to fall over being ruled by these two demonic giants. That being said though, it's not like Elder Jarl plans to just lay down and meet his end. He fully intends to fight off these two and all the other giants that IMU'S turned. But given his age, it's not very likely that he'd be able to last long in a battle so stacked against him, especially since it seems like IMU can continue to transform more and more giants to add on to their forces. So, with an army of devil giants alongside the Nightmares, Killing Cam, Summers, and even IMU themselves, I just don't see how the Straw Hats and the remaining giants can brute force their way to victory. So, we'll have to wait to see how this arc continues to develop in order to learn just how our heroes overcome these impossible odds. My bet is still on a powerful combined blast of Conqueror's Haki from Luffy and Loki being used to separate Gunko from IMU'S control and returning the giants to their original selves. But let me know in the comments down below what do you think the answer is to stopping this devil.